Good morning, all, and welcome to November. It's certainly starting to feel like November, that's for certain. After a weekend, the way I had 50-mile-an-hour winds to 60 miles a wind for 3 days and rain coming down in steroids. It was a lovely break in Wales. Anyway, this week's webinar, we're talking about, are you maximizing your consultant's time? We've talked about this for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Last week, we discussed cold calling. Is it dead? And the overriding response was, no, it's not, but it needs to change. And our approach to both candidates and clients need to improve. So this week, we're going to talk about how to capture your clients' and candidates' attention before you call them. And so we started to think about this last week. We said 90% of all CEOs said they would never return a cold call or open a cold email. 72% said all cold calls don't actually get through to a human being. However, 82% of buyers said they would accept a meeting with a salesperson after a series of contacts, which potentially would begin with a cold call. And 51% of company owners said they'd rather hear from a salesperson via the phone compared to email, fax, drop-in, etc. So we start to think about that and then flip that onto the candidate side. 79% of job seekers said they like to use social media in their job search, and that increased to 86%, obviously, with the younger people. On average, each corporate job attracts around about 250 resumes, of which 4 to 5 will get an interview, but only one will get the job. The average recruiter, and this really sort of shocked me, this came from the ladders, takes 6 seconds to scan a CV. After finding a job, though, 64% of candidates said they researched the company online, and 37% said they will not move forward to another job if they found the corporate company had poor information or had poor reviews on their business. 92% said they would consider their current leaving job for another role, but only if the company had an excellent reputation. And on average, it takes around about 24 weeks for someone from the start of looking for a job to finish looking for a job. And that came from the Bureau of Labour Statistics. So we start to think about company culture. It's now one of the leading attractors for candidates. And 90% of job seekers said that it's more important that the company embraces a transparent culture, and 76% went on to say that that would make a client more attractive to work for. So we'll start to arm with all this information. If you want some of this information, then drop it down to me. I've got loads of information because it was such an interesting read on all of this thing. So if you want, for armed with this information, how do we attract candidates and clients before we engage with them? This week, I'm joined by Paul Jacobs, Dave Pye and Paul Sharp. Heather's on a HR assignment. So let's kick off. And I think the first question is always the interesting one. Candidates and clients, what's changed for them since lockdown? Let's kick off, guys.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll kick off. Everyone's gone very quiet. I don't know. It's not unusual, is it? Very unusual for my colleagues to be so quiet. I mean, look, I think we know that we've entered a period that's kind of unprecedented in anybody's lifetime. And it's not the same as it was pre-COVID. Life has changed in so many respects. Interestingly, just as a side point, but it's just a reflection that's kind of pertinent to me, just talking to a lawyer just before we got on to the webinar about purchasing a house. And in the terms, it states you must not work from home. You cannot use your home as a workplace. And I'm saying, well, hang on, that's like 100% of the population almost that are working from home now, et cetera, et cetera. So, this was a clause written several years ago. Now it's normal to work from home. And that's just an indication on a practical level of how the world has changed. What do candidates and clients expect now? Well, they expect different levels of service and different attitudes to those that they were used to pre-COVID, I believe, because the world has changed. Their needs have changed, and what they're looking for in a workplace and what they're looking for from service and support from recruitment businesses has also changed. They may not even, I think, be completely aware of their sort of conscious need for that change, but it's definitely something that I expect most of the people listening today have already identified. And I think that what they expect from recruiters, particularly as we go forward, is a greater level of consultancy service, rather than what we were probably or mostly doing pre-COVID, which was placing people in jobs. If anything, that's reversed out, and this is, as I've said it consistently for a very long time now, our market is all about identifying great candidates and finding great jobs for great candidates. And that is the approach that I think most people are now adopting. And therefore, it definitely knocks on to the level of support and assistance and intelligence that we provide to people going forward. There you go. I've kicked it off, guys.
Oh, well done, Paul. I'll tell you what I think's changed, or what I think is expectations have changed. So there are more jobs from our clients, therefore there are more jobs for our candidates. However, the recruitment industry, in terms of the people that we provide, we struggle to attract, and in some cases struggle to retain really good recruiters. So therefore we've had to attract new people to our industry. And the expectation of our candidates and clients is that those people will be first class from day one. And often they're not, because they're hired and they're not trained appropriately. So you've got the change since COVID is a wide difference in the ability of different recruiters to meet the expectations, which are much higher, of both clients and candidates. So you've got a lot more untrained newbies in our recruitment arena, because we're desperate to hire people, and some companies I know are just taking as many people as they can get, hoping they work out. The ones that don't work out leave. But that has an effect both on clients and candidates, as we know. And some have managed to retain some very good recruiters, have trained them, have developed them, have made them into much more, as you say, Paul, much more consulting type, and therefore they stand out much better. So if you've got really good recruiters and you're training them appropriately and they are aware of what's going on in the market, I think they can meet the changing expectations of clients and contractors and candidates.
Interesting. So I've got a slightly different angle on this. I think that people's needs and wants has changed. And I think as recruiters, coming back to your point, Dave, a little bit, I think we revert back to type, and we revert back to what we know, and we revert back to doing things in the way that we've done it for a long time. And what I mean by that is, candidates now have different needs. 87% of a Gartner survey cited that the ability to work from home and choose when they wanted to work from home was the single most important factor when considering moving for another job. We've talked about this great resignation. Again, Gartner, and if anybody wants that report, by the way, it's a fascinating read. Just send me an email. They're backing up what the LinkedIn survey said about the great resignation, about candidates, in all probability, a chunk of the workforce moving on in the next 4 to 6 months. So when you then think about that, candidates want stability. They want that ability to work from home and flexibility, and they want stability and security. We've been through a period of time for the last 18 months where people didn't know whether they were going to have a job or not. And so if you think about the work from home and the stability and security being really important, and then you think about how as recruiters we go to market and what our message is, we tend to then revert back to what's on a job description which has been written pre-COVID, and we then start to home in on the transactional that has changed. It's become much more emotional than transactional, and I think we've got to change how we engage and attract with candidates. And we've got to think about their emotional needs and their personal needs much more than the transactional business needs. And I think that's a big thing. And Howard mentioned it, security, flexibility and culture is what is driving a lot of people in terms of whether they will probably stay at an organization or whether they'll move on. As a recruiter, if you can tap into that, either from attracting and engaging or communicating with your candidates, then I think that's a game changer in the industry, because it means you're getting to understand your candidates on a really intimate level.
I think obviously what we're talking about is attracting candidates and clients before we actually speak to them. And I think the question about what's actually changed is, I think clients have become more aware of their fragility in their recruitment process, that they are hiring on skills, but they are firing on behaviors. and they suddenly start to understand that it's the behavioural aspect of the candidate that is more important to them. And I think candidates, as Paul just said there, have suddenly realised that there is more things to life than work. And that work-life balance is really important. It's not all about money, it's about how you're treated with clients. And I think once we start to understand that, then we can start to hit the key hotspots that clients and candidates want, so we can start to attract them. And I think that's the sort of question that we're going to answer all the way through this process is, how do we attract them in that process? And I think understanding why the changes have been is really important. So the next question we sort of move on to then is, why is creating a candidate pool now equally, if not more important than creating and building a client database?
I kind of think this kind of moves back to the point I was raising earlier about, excuse me, how the market has changed, and that as everybody listening knows, that we're deluged. It just about doesn't matter which sector you're involved in recruitment, you're deluged with vacancies at the moment. There's 1.1 million vacancies in this country presently. It's underpinned by a whole range of things, not least Brexit. But the fact is that there is a major labour shortage in the UK right now, and that isn't going to change anytime soon, which is clearly great news for recruiters, but creates all sorts of challenges. And the challenges are really the fact that everyone is suffering from a candidate shortage, and it's not just petrol tanker drivers we're talking about here. You name it, we're short of it, and there are people listening that I recognise and know who are listening today that are all desperately trying to find as many candidates as they can because of the volume of roles they have coming in presently. This is, to some extent, a large extent, created by the fact that employers are desperately trying to claw back lost profits from the last 18 months and are rebuilding their workforce. We've got a lot of brand new businesses, startups out there right now, creating noise in the marketplace. And of course, importantly, and you made the point just now, Howard, people are changing jobs. People are fed up now. They want to change jobs. They've hunkered down over the last 18 months because having a job or receiving furlough money was better than not being in a job. But we're seeing a huge amount of people now deciding now's the right time to chop and change jobs, which is what we anticipated, both permanent growth, perhaps at a higher level than we expected, and of course temporaries and contract workers really being in great demand. So creating a candidate pool, I would argue very, very strongly right now, is more important than client base, although I say that in a very guarded fashion. Because one of the questions that comes up constantly is, should I be looking for more business when I can't actually deal with the amount of business I've presently got? And bizarrely, my answer is yes, because there's never a point at which you stop looking for new business. But we need to be selective about which clients we work with now, which vacancies we work on. Let's face it, we're no win, no fee industry.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, what you're saying there is right. And I think what we've got to start to think about is that recruitment has suddenly dawned on recruitment that you can have a billion requirements. You need candidates to convert and be the catalyst on that requirement to generate cash. And therefore, what we're doing is we've become so reactive to the client. I mean, today's the 23rd of November, and the client will ring you up on the 3rd of November and say, I want some to start on the 5th of November. And we go, oh, great, brilliant. But the client probably knew about that 6 months ago because they planned it and sorted it. And we're not on that scale with the client. So I think what we're talking about building candidate pools is, if we had a lens of what our clients wanted earlier, we could furnish them better with more qualified, better qualified candidates, because we have a longer runway to actually bring those candidates into our pool. So I think it's important now that we start to understand what the clients want, so we can start to build the client pool. So we have to change the client's mindset to allow us to get in and understand what they want, so we can pre-build a client candidate database for them, rather than just pick of what's available now. And there's a very difference in the two things.
And it's all about, as I said at the beginning, being consultative and client meetings, client meetings, client meetings, client meetings, client meetings. We keep on about it. Get close to your clients. Sorry, Dave.
I'm just smiling because obviously we need to keep close to our clients. But to Howard's point, we are in the position of knowing where the talent is. We are in the position of helping to create the talent pools. Sometimes what we're guilty of is not advising and consulting with our clients that we can actually give them, we can furnish them, we can help with their workforce management, their workforce planning, because often the way that we reward our staff, the way that we engage with our staff is about day-to-day transactional placements, not longer term consulting engagements. At the risk of throwing a stat at you, everybody else has had a stat, so I'm going to have a stat as well. Remember to tell your clients there are 50% less people born in 1984 than there were in 1964 in this country. There are just less people, and there are going to be less people. Therefore, we've got to build candidate pools. We've got to have that intelligence to articulate, this is what's happening in the world of work to our clients. This is how we can help you. This is the way we can help solve some of those issues you're going to face. And some of it, yes, I need somebody for Friday, but actually you need to build that a bit more long term.
That's a brilliant
Dave, just
stat,
on that,
Mr. Pye. Brilliant stat. I love that.
Just on that, Dave, do you think, when you talk about not engaging with clients and not asking clients that question, do you not think that comes back to a training issue? And that people can't do it, it's just that we don't train people on how to do it.
I think that's a great shout, Paul, because a lot of our training, I was on a client site not long ago, and the training manual that was there, it had some dust on it, and it was written in quill, but they were still using it. And it just, as I flicked through it and the dust emanated off, it just didn't apply to anything that's happened since March 2020. It was really old. And by really old, I mean probably 5 years old. Well, 5 years is decades away in what's going on in the client base and the workforce right now.
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to add as well, I think there's two other things for me. I think structure of an organization is really important now. So, I think we all passionately believe in, breaking up the structure so that you've got people focusing on delivery and just the candidate bit and building out candidate relationships. So I think that's really important. I think those organizations that have invested in marketing are now starting to emerge as being people that have got talent pools. So, that marketing presence is really important, and really good and meaningful candidate content. And the last one I just add is the CRM, which will be, I'm sure, music to Howard's ears. It's just those agencies that have got a really good CRM and have been using it are using that CRM to connect and engage with people, one-to-many rather than one-on-one.
I think I always keep saying, if it's not on a CRM, it doesn't exist. Hence why my missus is now called Helen CRM, just to make sure she does exist from there. But, the comment then that leads on is how would you start? I mean, Mark's asked a great question. How do we tap into these people if there's a great resignation coming on? So the question then is, how would you start to approach building a candidate pool now?
Firstly, I think, and we talked just this second about CRM, most, especially established, mature recruitment businesses already have deep levels of data sitting on their CRM. We've said this many times, and every recruitment business owner knows this. We've spent a lot of money in recruitment businesses attracting candidates in the past for a variety of methods. We take on board their data, their CVs, we put them into the system, and then when we take new jobs, what do? We advertise those jobs on job boards. We go looking on social media, and very occasionally we have a look at the people on our database. Lo and behold, very often the people we place in jobs now come to us via the expensive advertising we just put out there again, only to discover that actually that candidate was already on our database, but we had kind of old data. And therefore the recruitment consultants are not feeling confident about searching their own database. I'm going around in circles here, but everybody will understand what I mean. The truth is that we already have a lot of the candidates, if you're a mature recruitment business, on our systems. And what we fail to do as an industry, and I am generalizing here, of course, so it's one of those if the cap fits situations, we fail to consistently communicate through a very determined and very rigid process with the people that have already been attracted to our industry, to our recruitment business. And as a consequence, we lose touch with those people. We have no idea where they are. We don't know whether the CVs we have on the system are up to date contemporary, whether we can use them. When we search through the data, we don't find appropriate candidates because the data is dirty. So the answer is we've got to spend a huge amount of time consistently through processes looking at keeping in close contact through a variety of methods with people that have been attracted to our business in the past. And that also applies, I might add, to people who just slipped through our fingers that we had on interviews, and indeed perhaps people, and we have to be careful here, but I'll say it anyway, people we've placed in jobs. So, you know, we already have that access, but of course we've also got to be extremely active on social media, building our brand, making sure people are aware of us, not posting jobs only, but making sure we're posting information and intelligence about our market sector to create the obvious statement that we are experts in our space.
So I think that leads a little bit further than just, posting data. And I think we've talked about this before, is that, people don't remember data very well because it's all stats and figures, etc. But if you create that data into a story, then you get more. So whether you're marketing about your market, you're running campaigns talking about the types of clients you're working with, but what those clients are doing to attract candidates, starts to see what candidates start to look at. Using market information to create social media posts to see what your candidates are looking at. So it starts to see, clients can start to see that you are actually addressing that. If you start to think about candidates read job posts, and we talk about dwell time on social media, what are we doing about rewriting our job posts so they spend more time and dwell on that job post? If we're spending 6 seconds reviewing a CV, how long do you think they spend reviewing a job post? Probably about the same amount of time. So if our job post isn't getting the level of information, but what we've got to think that it's not just the candidates that are looking for the job that read those job posts. Sometimes most candidates read those job posts just to see what the market's doing. 5 pieces of information that Glassdoor brought out and said, these are what the client candidates are looking for on a job post. The details of the compensation package, how often is it, high package or competitive package? Well, instantly candidates switched off. Details of the benefits, and that's what Paul Sharp was talking about, working from home, etc., etc. What are those basics? The basic company information, now we all put that on, but what they're saying is details of what makes that company an attractive place to work. And one thing that I was really surprised from a Glassdoor, they said on every job post should be the company mission, vision, and values, because that is what's going to attract your candidates. Have they got the same vision, the same values? Is it a mission that they want to get involved in? So it was interesting. How we're marketing at the moment is generic to a certain degree, although we think it's very precise because we're using data. But what we're not actually doing is thinking of the trigger points that would attract a candidate and the trigger points that would attract a client, to work for each other. And I think that's where we can start to change our marketing approach. And therefore candidates reading this, because they read this prior to applying to a job, therefore we start to attract them before we start to engage with them. And that's a bigger difference, because most candidates will switch off a job post because it's not attractive to them in that first 2 or 3 lines, because I think it's 75% now view it on their mobile.
I think the last point I'm just going to add on the client bit, candidate bit for me, Howard, is we frequently look for affirmation in terms of what other people think, how other people view a product or a service, and the same goes for agencies as well. So, having really strong Google reviews or reviews on Trustpilot or whatever mechanism agency owners use, having that and making sure it's really visible just really helps to communicate to the candidates in your domain that you are really good at what you do, and if you're in a professional space, then you're experts in that space. Yeah. So that makes a massive difference. That is almost getting your candidates to do some marketing for you, and it's very, very easy to do and very effective.
And I think part of the question was, how do you build a candidate database? We'll go back to the earlier comments. We were saying that there are more new people in recruitment, and all of those people are all trying to contact the same candidates. And we did a bit of work on this with a client I'm doing some work with. And actually what we boiled it down to was try to be memorable. And isn't that difficult when you've got to make 50 candidate calls a day to get hold of the right candidate? But if you can make yourself memorable as a recruiter speaking to a candidate, it may be your tone of voice, it may be the fact that you're very polite, it may be that you call the candidate and ask them a question not about the job, but about something else. Remember, they haven't got a lot of time and they're getting bombarded. So how can you stand out? Because if you can stand out as the recruiter and win over the client's trust and loyalty, you will become more memorable. And if you keep in contact with that person, you're then building that person into your pool and letting them into your orbit, if you like, for your clients. So it's not an easy answer, as in being memorable, but it's certainly in a market where 40% of the recruiters are new, being memorable will help you build a candidate pool.
And just to come back to one point that Mr. Jacobs mentioned, and I really agree, just about going back over candidates that you've placed, candidates that you've had out on interview. You know, Howard and I have done quite a bit of work with a couple of owners, and we've looked at, you know, how many candidates are placed. So if you register 1,000 candidates a year, how many of those candidates do you actually place after they've gone through to initial interview? You know, candidates that you placed 2 or 3 years ago, how much have you kept in contact with those clients? Some of them might be hiring managers now, by the way. So you have got to have an air of caution, because you can't be seen to be poaching people that you've placed. And that's what I think Paul was saying, quite right too. However, go back over that list. And certainly when Howard and I have been working with agency owners, looking at the data is quite shocking, in so much as the percentage of candidates that we've put out an interview, but then actually placed at some point downstream. We lose contact.
What was more shocking was the amount of people that we've put out on interview that haven't had a placement, that we've never then recontacted again. And we've talked about that last week about and never recontacted. So this leads to the next question, which is sort of the same question, but from a client side. So clients are now getting bombarded by lots of marketing campaigns. And we said last week that marketing campaign will become the new cold call, the new entry into a client. So online emails, in posts, et cetera, et cetera. So how would you, first of all, start attracting your clients' attention? Because I think at the moment, we seem to see clients and candidates as two separate things, when actually we should be seeing them as one. Yeah. They are both customers.
Yep, you're completely right, Howard. I mean, we somehow, on every website, every recruitment business that you've ever looked at has two sections, one for candidates, one for clients, and actually they're the same human beings. We have contact with people at different points in their careers. We place them in jobs, they develop in those jobs, they become clients, we place them again, they become a candidate, and so on. I mean, that's the object, obviously, of any decent recruitment business, to assist somebody throughout their entire career. And that means at some stage they're a client, sometimes they're a candidate, and they're the same people. I think the point here is, and it's an important one, we all get bombarded, as you said, by marketing, and it can get pretty tedious. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that just reading often just the heading of emails that I'm getting that's unsolicited, I just delete. I don't even read, because I know I don't want to read them. I'm not interested in them, and I'm sure I'm not alone. But I will definitely read things that I think are relevant. And I think when you're sending out, and Dave made a very good point, when you're sending out marketing, whether that's online or it's emailing, whatever, it has to be relevant and it has to be memorable. It has to be memorable. Now that comes down to the look and feel of it. So, just cutting and pasting jobs, which most recruitment consultants do, is lazy, in my opinion. Doesn't really gain interest too much from candidates. You have to make them look in line with your brand. They have to be attractive to look at, whether that's video or graphics in the first instance. And the content of what you're putting out has to be memorable and relevant to the individual. So if you're sending out global mail shots to your entire database, you're going to really annoy people, a lot of people, because an awful lot of people that receive that stuff, the stuff isn't relevant to them. So you need to cut and dice, make sure that the information that you're sending out is relevant to the market you're sending it to. That means that global mailers are just not going to work. You have to be far more precise than that. It's about precision. Who are you sending information to? Is it relevant to them, their jobs, their backgrounds? Is it relevant to their interests? So that takes a lot of work, but then you'll get better return than just sending a sort of lazy shot that goes out to 20,000 people and about 19,900 of them are irritated by it. So think hard about what you're sending out, what it looks like, how relevant it is to your market. The extra effort you put in will get you a greater reward in terms of the response you receive.
I remember about a year, no, was it a year ago, 6 months ago, we did a panel where we had just clients on the panel. And we asked them about their view about recruiters. And one of the things that stuck in my head about one of the clients said about recruiters, what is it that you want from recruiters? And the client said, I want them to make me look better. Furnish me with information so that I can internally look as if I know exactly what I'm talking about the market. They were experts in their particular field that they worked in, but they weren't necessarily experts in the world of work. And we're the experts in the world of work. So we transfer our knowledge to them to make them look better internally. So I think that's how you can build a better and stronger relationship with clients. That's a key thing for me. And that came from a client.
I think building on that, and I think Paul's right, that precision bit is really important. I think using data is really important. Using data to give people really good advice. So, I know some of my clients use things like LinkedIn Talent Insights. So sending them a one-pager on, the makeup of Java developers in Milton Keynes, as an example, is one thing you can do. So you're actually giving some intel away and information away. You're actually partially advising the organization, or the hiring manager on how to solve the problem. And I think we're probably going to come into this in a bit anyway. But sometimes you almost have to give away in order for them to be invited in to actually solve the problem. And I think sometimes we forget just how much data and information we've got access to. And some of it's just using that data really wisely. So, products like Horsefly, LinkedIn Talent Insights, MC, there's some really good data sources out there that you can use in a really smart way and just brand it all up, push it out, and it'll look absolutely uber professional.
I think what we're saying there, that we keep talking about very data. According to Talent Insight, not Talent Insight, according to Social Talent, they were saying around about 63% of all attendees remember stories. Only 5% of the people who attended any of those meetings remember the stats. So we've got to create those stats and use the stats and create a story about that. And I think that's where what we've got to start to think about is that we are still buying or selling for that sale today, where 63% of all people who request information will not purchase for about 3 months, and around about 20% will take 12 months to convert into a sale. So we've got to start to think about the long-term gain. So things like your social media campaign, your website needs to reflect what you're giving away. So you might give a really good post away on social media with lots of data in that, but that post then disappears into the ether after a while because you can't find it. It takes a long time to locate that. Is that post on your website? Because what most people said, that once they start to engage in the process, they start to engage with the clients that they are working with and the agency that they are working with, and they check them out first. So your website needs to be relevant, up to date from there. And then it's about creating, I would think, a strategy that is about an attraction. So what is your customer attraction strategy to actually get people from liking a post or reading a post to actually onto your database, so you actually can call me and actually either convert into a client or convert into a candidate that's going for interview? And I think that's when we start to look about it. What do we change? So as I said before, I think we're too generic about selling, and what Paul said there about solving problems and curing problems, and talk about how we've done that for candidates and for clients will start to attract people, because that it relates to them. They can relate to the story about how you did something and what you did and what that other person said, etc. That's when it becomes real life, and that's when they start to engage. At the moment, we're too generic, we're too bland, all of us across the marketplace, and we need to sort of change that a little bit. And once you up that ante, what you'll find is that people will then engage. So we've talked a lot over the last 12 to 18 months about values and honesty, and why it's vitally important to both candidates and clients. So there's the question: why is if I go on most websites, the values are honesty, integrity, etc., etc. Why are our values now becoming more and more important to both the candidate and the client?
I can't help but feel this is related to what Paul Sharp often talks about, EVP, employer value proposition. You have to be authentic. There's no point, as you said, Howard, in putting these things up on your website or posting them on the walls in your office if it actually means very little to the people that work in the business. Everything has to be transparent and it has to be consistent. People buy people. So yes, they'll buy your business, they'll buy what you stand for, they'll buy your name, but in fact their views about your organisation would be very firmly held based upon their experience of working directly with an individual or individuals in your organisation. So, if you're saying, as you've just said, Howard, we're honest, we have integrity and so on and so forth, then that has to be reflected in the actions and the behaviours of the people that you work with in the business. There cannot be any gap between what you say publicly and internally you're all about and the attitudes of the people that work in the company. They have to be completely conjoined. So, and I think that's a vitally important point, because the truth is that for any of us that worked in the industry for a very long time, for any period of time, we know that people buy people. They buy into you as a human being. We talk about the you brand, but that you brand, the who you are and how you react and how you deal with people, has to be absolutely exactly the same as those values you put out there. And I think people need a lot of guidance now in this brand new world that we work in and that we're living in. It's a confusing world we live in right now. And people need their hands held. They need to be given proper, decent consultancy services and support and direction. And that needs to be given by somebody, I think, I'm sure everyone would agree, who is exhibiting the values that you've stated and placed on your website. I think those things are vitally important. And when it doesn't happen, the damage that it causes your business is enormous.
I think a lot of organizations, Paul, but building on what you've said, I think a lot of organizations do the same thing. The one thing that separates people out and organizations out, it's how you do it. And I think that is where, whether you're a recruiter trying to hire people into your business, or you're an organization trying to hire people into that organization direct or through an agency, it's the how they do it is so important. And I think you're absolutely right in everything you've said. I think it's if that's the one area of differentiation, then it's how you communicate that, and it can't be different. I also think it's about how you measure it. So I think you do have to measure it to stress test that it's accurate, and it's therefore how you convey that. And I think that just comes back a little bit to candidates and clients. If one of the ways that you would do that is through actually doing a video advert rather than doing an advert in general, video adverts from the hiring manager or the owner of a business or the head of a function is 10 times more powerful than anything else, or a video advert from somebody trying to do recruiting. And the reason for that is because people want to buy into that authenticity. They want to see that individual. They want to see the white of the eyes. They want to hear it. They don't want to read it on a website. They want to see that if Paul Jacobs is hiring, they want to hear from Paul Jacobs. And that's where I think sometimes, again, as recruiters, there's a massive opportunity. And sometimes that's where we go back to following old paths. If security, culture, purpose, the why is really important, we've got to think about ways that we've got to be able to communicate that to either candidates or through clients.
I'm going to challenge that a little bit, Paul, because I think you need to link those two things. The verbal communication, the written communication, because candidates will still then Google and look at you on your website and make sure it's there. So your vision and your mission statements need to be aligned. But what we can't be is a sheep in wolf's wolf in sheep's clothing, sorry. Because if we're all this nicey on the outside and they get inside, and it's completely different. The persona inside is completely different. We never call them back. We never deal with them. We're too busy rushing them off the phone, etc. Both candidates and clients. Okay, that is where the mismatch starts. That your value and mission statements do not match what the actual candidate or the client gets, and that switches them off. Really switches them off. So I read loads and loads of stats about that particular point that said candidates get switched off because they never get called back. There was a post on LinkedIn last week, and it had over 300 comments from candidates all about a single agency saying they never call back, they never do this, they never do that, they never, and it just went on and on and on and on, this thread. And I'd come in about 3 hours after the post had been posted, and there was, I say, over 300 comments from candidates all saying the same thing. They never get that. But yet you went onto that client's website, and the website was, we are honest, we treat everyone with respect, we call everyone back, we do this, we do that. And yet there was hundreds and hundreds of candidates saying, no, you do not. So I think if you're going to put your value and mission statements up, you've got to live them. If you live them, then you start to change how you're perceived, and therefore more engagement will happen. So we've got to start to be honest with ourselves and have more scrutiny, because we're under more scrutiny than ever before. And we need to scrutinize ourselves. Are we living what we actually say we're living? If we're not, then that's an outrageous lie. Dave, you get anything to add on that?
I was just going to say, it's not the or, it's the and, Howard. And so whilst people may go back to a website, the minute that they see somebody do something or act in a different way, what the words on the website is immaterial.
That's right, absolutely true.
The intention and behaviour bit. So this is what I'm saying. It's everybody's saying what the values are on the website. Everybody's got values on there, and that's okay for a starting point. But it's got to come to life. And
so let's bring this question to the end. Then let's bring this question to a proper thing. So if you were a candidate or a client, then which values would you be swayed by? And to add the question to the end, and what would lead you to distrust a recruiter, an agency, or a client? So what values would sway you, but what would you then be distrust?
So if I'm in a specific role, I have specific skill sets, I'm going to work with people that I believe, based on reputation, based on what I see on websites, based on their communication with me, and so on, are experts in my space and know their stuff. I'm also going to be moved towards recruitment businesses who I understand have great connections with organizations that I would like to work for. So their standing in my space is something that would definitely attract me to work with them. I don't want to work with people, particularly as an experienced candidate, who do not understand my background, who don't understand my experience, my skill sets, have limited understanding of what I'm looking for, or indeed the organizations that would be attracted to me. So, and add to that the points that you guys have just been making. I want to speak to somebody that actually gives a damn about me, that cares about me, that is genuinely interested in me, and delivers on their promises. To your point, Howard, if they're going to call me back, call me back. I want to work with people, in other words, that reflect my own standards, in essence.
Yeah, I think agencies, individual recruiters who do the basics right, time and again, over time, they're the ones that the candidates and the clients are going to build trust with. And we've spoken in the last 18 months, I don't know how many times, that trust is the new currency. And if you are of a good character, you are a good character. And I define character as what you're like when no one can see you, because that comes out when people can see you. If you are a good character and you can display trust, and you can get the trust of the candidate and the client, then you're on to a winner. And as recruiters, we're normally pretty good. We do go on gut feel, don't we? Oh, he sounds good, she sounds good. We're not always right, but we're often more right than wrong. So you've got those first few seconds on a call or an email or in a networking group or on a website, whatever it is, to try to build that trust. And that's the sort of thing that I think candidates and clients are looking for.
If you think about what some of the stats that I've read, providing a poor candidate experience says 10 job seekers, it means 7 of them will never want to work with you or the company that you're supplying again. So if we talk about a candidate shortage, if we're supplying a poor service, then we're switching most of them off. So I think what would attract me as a candidate, yes, I'd read the values and the missions and stuff like that. I'm looking at simplicity. How easy is it for the job process to be started? How easy it's to me to interact with the agency or with the client? According to the job boards, 60% of job seekers abandon the job application due to its length or complexity. Wow. And we've got a job shortage, and yet 60% we're turning off because we make it so much complex. So we start to think when buyers actually choose, they provide a solution provider that can actually give ease of access to the solution. So if we can help our candidates navigate through that process and help our clients navigate that process, it makes the solution easier. So to me, what would switch me on and sway me was the simplicity of the client and the agency's application. What would switch me off, though, is that lack of communication, that lack of feedback. That would create distrust, and that's what definitely would switch me off. Anything else to say, guys?
We're running out of time.
I think we're out of time, mate.
Unfortunately, well, this is one of those subjects that I think every one of us and everyone listening could talk about. I must admit, a great deal more time.
And I switch off when we run over. I don't like
So, as I posted out at the beginning, obviously we're always looking at. We've got lots and lots of subjects that we want to cover. But we want to make sure that we're covering the subjects that you want to hear us discuss and try break down. And so, as we sort of like to sum up today's session, if you want to just drop in the chat box topics that you would like us to discuss, it'd be really sort of great for us to say, yes, we've got that topic, great, we can use that, because we want to do what things are happening now, and every recruitment agency has a different side of things, etc. We want to make sure we cover all of that. So to cover off today, how to attract our candidates and clients, I think it's all about that authenticity. I think it's about being uber precise in the marketing we're giving out, where we think we're giving really good data, but it's maybe a little bit too generic, and we're not turning it into a story that can be related to both a candidate and a client, which then creates attraction. We've got to start to think that, there is a candidate shortage, but if we're, disillusioning our candidates because the complexity of our process or our poor service offering, then we're creating our own candidate shortage. So to attract these people first, they're going to look at you, they're going to critique you, they're going to interrogate your business before they engage with you. So make sure that what they see is what they get once they engage, because if it doesn't match, then the disengagement becomes very swift and very quick. And in this current market, we know that if you've got 10 really good candidates, engaging with them, if you're switching 7 of them off, wow. If you've got 10 good candidates, what can you do with 10 good candidates? I'm pretty certain that most agencies would say I could make 10 placements. So how do you make those 10 placements? So next week, we'll be back with another topic. Paul and Dave, thank you very much for your time. It's been much appreciated.
Thank you,
Ladies
guys.
and gents, thank you for your time as well on a Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much.
Take good care, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Have a good week, everybody.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.